This is Beyond the Uniform with TJ Brassil.
Well, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Uniform. I'm TJ Brassil, and I'm joined by my first duo of the season, Clayton Murphy and formerly Ariana Washington, now Ariana Murphy. You two just recently got married. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining the show. So I guess first things first, how's being newlyweds?
It's fine.
It's good.
Yeah, nothing different.
We've just kind of recovered from the wedding and all the planning that went into it, and a year and a half of like stress and planning and fun. And then we had a great weekend, and we've been back here in Portland, just kind of like reviving and recuperating, and kind of just getting our bearings back together, and kind of just enjoying the newlywed wife.
Yeah. That's awesome. Did you guys do anything for a honeymoon yet? Is that down the line?
No, we kind of did like a long vacation in October, like right before the wedding, and we plan on doing like another like semi-long vacation right after like Indoor Worlds. So I guess like those two combined will be like a honeymoon. So yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. That's cool. All right, so I was lucky enough to be at the beautiful wedding that you guys were at.
You were.
And something that struck me kind of funny was when Dr. Treasure was talking about how you two met. Both of you had like the same story, but kind of different. So what's the actual story of how you guys met?
Go ahead.
I mean, it's obviously my side of the story.
My side of the story is really right, but I'll go ahead and let you go ahead and tell it.
We're never gonna. I think that one will ride out for a while.
I think we can both agree that we met playing Uno.
Yeah, like I said, like Darren said, there is parts of the story that are agreed upon and are like not negotiable.
I know the truth, and the people that were around us know the truth, and that's that on that.
Okay. All right. Makes sense. All right. Now, at the top of the show, I mentioned both of you were Olympians. Clayton, you won an Olympic bronze medalist in the 800. So with the trials coming up this year and everything, how does having that bronze medal kind of put you in position to go for another Olympic berth this year?
I mean, I think that it's motivation, but it's also kind of that thing of like, I can do it, I can be there. I think I'm much more mature, much better, well-rounded runner than what I was even 4 years ago. So I think going into this year, I am just setting myself up better, and hopefully can build on that. I think it does put a pretty big target on my back going into trials and going into if I make the team going into the Olympics. I think it just kind of adds that extra little bit of people kind of want to knock me off the top, but I kind of embrace that and just kind of hopefully just go into it and then stay within myself, but also just kind of embrace the pressure a little bit and kind of just enjoy the ride.
Does it give you any more kind of confidence that you've been there, you've done this, you to try to do this again?
I think a little bit, but especially in an event like the 800, every race is different, and it's a difficult thing to kind of just like bank on. Like I've done it before. I mean, if you look at there's the Olympic or the world and Olympic medalists over the last like 8 years, it's completely different, except for really one person who's been consistent with David Rudisha. Other than that, people interchange all the time of who's even in the final. So I think it's an event where you have to have confidence in yourself, no matter what your accolades are or what you have going into it. And I think I'm building that back up going into Tokyo, and I think going into the Olympic trials, I think I'm building that confidence. And so it's about building that confidence within myself and having that within me.
Now, with both of you being Olympians and Clayton being married to an Olympian, does that have a positive or negative or any type of effect on how you train with Ari, knowing what it takes to get there?
I think Ari knows what it takes to get there, and I think that's like a big thing when I come home. Because there is a sense that we leave track at the door and we leave practice at the door when we come in the house, and we try to separate the two. But in a lifestyle like track and field, it is a 24/7 job, and your sleep and your eating and your habits you have at home really do affect what you do outside the door. So I think there's a lot we try to leave at the door when we come home, and especially when I come home for practice, I try to like switch off. But at the same time, there's conversations we have to have, and she needs to know where my head's at all the time and make sure that I'm in the right mindset to go practice. But she also pushes me and has made comments in the past about like my eating and stuff like that, and she'll always check me there. And we like there's like some difficulty where like we're not on the same schedule or so, and one of us want to stay up late and one of us want to go to bed, or one of us want to go out to eat and one of us want to eat. Like there is sometimes a conflict, but we do a really good job of finding resolutions and making sacrifices. We both like make sacrifices, and she makes a lot of sacrifices. And with me being away from home at camps and stuff and practice a lot, like there's a lot of sacrifices she makes. But we're kind of like at this point, in as short as a career can be, we're kind of all in, and hopefully can pay off going into the summer.
And on the flip side for you, Ari, what kind of mindset do you have to have when, like he was just saying, you want to leave track at the door, but you also want to keep encouraging him and keep trying to help him get to where he's at? How do you work with that?
I think we have like a nice balance of like, there's a time and a place to talk about, what goes on outside of track, and like there's a time and place to talk about like what goes on like in track. And I think that like he does a good job. I try to like get him as like level-headed as possible, and like let's talk about Grey's Anatomy or like something else other than practice. But I do make sure that every time he comes home, I ask him how was your workout, how was your run, and kind of like you come home, we talk about it, and then we don't talk about it for the rest of the day unless something comes up and we have to. But I think that kind of like helps us a lot of like, let's talk about it right when you get home and it's fresh on both of our minds, and then we just kind of leave it at that. And I think like even last night, we had a talk last night, just like seeing like, oh, like we haven't really had a time to like check in with each other. Like, how are you? Like, how are you doing like with life? How are you doing with track? Like, what's going on? Are you ready for season? Like that kind of conversation. And I think that, like I said, there's a time and a place for everything. And I think that's like the hardest thing for us sometimes is like finding that balance of like, when do we talk about it and when is it too much? Like, like when do you talk about your job 25/8 and when do you not talk about your job? So but I think we do sometimes a good job of doing it.
I think there's like a good place that we have where like we walk in the door, we decompress, we figure out what we did and what we didn't, and like especially after a race, whether she's at the race or not, there is like we do have like always have like a short conversation of like decompressing about the race and the event and like the positives and negatives and what I could do different going into the next one. And then it really is like put in the back of our mind and enjoy the rest of our trip, because we are going to travel the world and enjoy things. And so like there is a period of like where we do stress and talk about track together and do that, but at the same time like we try to enjoy where we're at and stuff like that. So
you mentioned traveling the world and getting to go to all these different places. So how do you guys deal with or balance that act of focusing on your race or your meet or whatever is coming up, or maybe multiple meets, and also getting to enjoy these places that you get to go to?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I think there is a lot of places where like I'd love to enjoy it more. But there is like I'm lucky enough to get into certain places where I get into the meet early enough or get to stay like an extra day or something where like I can enjoy like the city and the place. Like a meet like this year I was doing multiple meets and I got to go into Oslo in early, and I was there for like 2 or 3 days early. So like the first day I was there, I literally just rode around on one of those like bird scooters for hours and just explored the city and was able to like, can do that. But there is a lot of meets that like I'll fly in and fly out, and I'm on a 6 a.m. flight after the meet, and I'm getting in 2 days before, and the last thing I want to do is ride the scooter around the day before the race. Like a lot of people think like it's a lot of glory, but even like my dad went on a trip in 2018. He went on a trip to Europe with me and did like a 2-week stint in Europe with me, and he started to like hate it at the end of it because all you do is sit in a hotel room and watch Netflix and just like stare at TV. And he visited like the same bar like 3 times, and like the meet was fat and hungry. Like he just like he didn't realize like that you really don't get to explore these cities, and a lot of times like the meets aren't even in like the main metro parts and part of the city. Like Oslo is a very lucky meet. Like they put you up downtown next to the train station and the opera house, and like you can explore the coast, and you're a scooter ride away from like a big little shopping and like eating area, and like it's a very lucky meet. But like a lot of meets are like, they put you out in like the middle of nowhere. Like Rome, I was in Rome for 4 days, but I only got to go into the city once because we were almost 30 minutes outside of the city without traffic, and most of the time it was like closer to an hour because of traffic. So like just like I was in Rome, but like I only got to like drive around the city once and like just see the Colosseum. So like there's a lot of like sacrifices and a lot of differences that I think people think it's like all glitz and glamour, but like track and field is pretty far from glitz and glamour compared to a lot of other sports.
That's fair. So you mentioned not really getting to see much. Is that now, with both of you having been to the Olympics, is that a little different at the Olympics? Do you get to experience that a little more, or is it so much of the same where it's really you're there for a reason, you're gonna go do that or you're gonna go compete?
I think the Olympics is like a little bit different, even like world champs, because you're there for so long. You can kind of always take that time before your event to kind of explore and take that time after. Like the Olympics, track and field is the last event to go, so you're there for like 2 weeks with nothing to do. Like, why not like go to the mall and like go see like what a Brazil mall is all about? Like go see like Christ the Redeemer. Like go see all those things that like you would never have a chance to do if you were here for like another like regular meet. Where we trained at the Olympics was like on the naval base, so it was like so beautiful, and it's like, well, I don't want to do anything else except for like walk around and like enjoy it here. You like go party and whatnot, but I think that all athletes kind of have that same mindset of like, oh, like let's do all these things before 3-4 days from your event. It's time to like lock in and focus and not leave your room all day, and that's totally fine. And then after you're done, it's like, okay, well, let's turn the page and let's go turn up again. So I think it's like a balance. And but I think that like he said, like everyone realizes that like you're there for a purpose and it's like for business reasons. And in your mind, I think we always make like mental checklists of like, oh, we got to go back to this place and go visit, and we got to go back to this place and go visit. And there's some places where like you leave and you're like, oh, I can't wait to never go there again. So it's just like a balance, but it is like fun because you can kind of say like, oh, I did go, even though I didn't really see what most people go see when they visit, but I did go. So like that's all that really matters. So it's another stamp on the passport. So
I think Worlds and Olympics are different in the fact than like a regular big European meet or whatever meet, because you're in a team setting.
mm-hmm.
You technically have like you're competing against them technically, like they're still technically competing against them for the same medals, but at the same time, like you're on a team with 100 people. Like at Worlds, like you're hanging out in the hospitality area with everybody. At Olympics, you're going to like Nike hospitality, you're going to USA hospitality, you're going to like Gillette hospitality, like you're going to all these hospitality areas with like your teammates and your people who are your friends and stuff.
Yeah.
And they're all there for one thing. Like the one thing that I made sure in 2016 was like I went in for closing and went in for opening ceremonies and stayed till closing and made sure I did both, because like
you never
know when you go back. And my plan is like hopefully to go back this year, but maybe lock in a little bit more and even focus even more on the track and kind of like skip a few of the extracurriculars before that I've already done. Like I made sure to stay in like the dorms and stay in like the village and all that stuff and eat in the village as much as I could and do all this stuff to like experience what's being like a true Olympian is. That way, if it never happens again, one, I have that opportunity, but also like next year if I go back, I can do the kind of lock and load mentality of like get into Tokyo, get in and get out and really like focus on like what I'm there for, but at the same time like try to enjoy the Olympics.
Very true. Yeah. I remember a lot of people telling me like, I'm like, oh, like we talk to all these veterans. I'm like, oh, are you staying in the village? They're like, no, I stayed in the village my first time. And, that's not for me. Like I'm here for a purpose. But yeah, like the same thing. Like I made sure that we walked in opening ceremonies. I didn't go to closing, but I, did everything. I did everything else. So, but you want to make sure you enjoy those things because you never know when you get the opportunity to go back.
So you can opt not to stay in the village?
Yeah, and I don't know how it works because like I didn't do it, and I like of course like Dr. Treasure and McHenry and all of them were like Oregon Project staff. So I remember like going to like they had this huge house, and I remember like going to their house to get treatment because I was like, well, none of them are staying in the village, so I gotta like go to them, which is fine. But what? Why are you driving?
You're like shaking there.
Oh, I'm like rocking back and forth in the chair. Sorry. But. So I guess like people choose not to stay in the village. And I even had me and Deja were roommates and we were in a suite with like, I think like a couple of like the race walkers and the marathoners. And it's supposed to be 6 of us in our suite, but there's really only 3 of us there because everybody else had opted not to stay in the village. And I was like, well, that's fine. Now we can kind of like have our own room. But
a lot of people don't stay in the village for either like sleeping, like they need to sleep in a certain like dark area or can't have a roommate or whatever. Or a lot of people don't stay in the village because in the village, you couldn't have altitude machines. So you couldn't have simulated altitude. And so a lot of people stayed where they could simulate altitude in tents or sleep with machines or whatever that you couldn't bring into the village. So that was like that was the main reason the Oregon Project was not in the village, was because of like the altitude tents and the altitude camps. But I know some people, other track runners who didn't stay because they had certain priorities where they needed to sleep differently or sleep on a different schedule or didn't want to deal with like the roommate or suite situation. Because there's like the way the suites were set up is like it's 6 people in a suite and it's 3 little bedrooms and 3 little like twin size beds. So you're really like sleeping on top of like the person next to you, and then the room next to you is on top of that. And there's like, so just a lot of people had like priorities and different things like that. But I know that was one of the main things was like altitude camps and stuff like that. So.
Okay. So you're not living like kings and queens like people might think you are.
Oh, no.
We're not living like
we were definitely not living like the basketball players. They were very fancy, and we were living like me and Deja would like reach our hands out and we'd be like holding hands. And I'm like, well, I guess we're gonna go to sleep now. Like, you know, like but it was fun, you know what I mean? Like it's fun and you get that opportunity, and like it's kind of cool to kind of like see it, and it's very like, surreal. And I'm still sometimes like, so I'm like scrolling through my Snapchat memories. I'm like, oh, like this was so much fun. Like even though like as shitty as conditions were, like it was so much fun. And yeah, it was loud, and people would be out like in the courtyard partying till like 4 a.m. and it'd be super loud, but it was like fun. So it's like take what you can get. So yeah.
So you're saying you said you didn't live like the basketball player. So is it different per sport, like what your living situation is kind of?
Almost every sport was in the
village.
The village, like swimming was in there, track was in there, gymnastics was in,
yeah, all of them.
But basketball players slept in a yacht with like 7-foot beds, which I guess I guess kind of makes sense for the 7-foot bed. Had a yacht with a private chef and all that stuff, and they slept there. Which, I mean, they have millions and millions of dollars, whereas other Olympic sport really, like all the athletes there make $1 million a year, like combined. But yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different of like sport and money that goes into it. Almost every sport except for basketball was in the village and in the same building, and we were all in the same building. We all had the same track and field and swimming and gymnastics had their own medical staffs per their federations. Every other sport shared all the other sports shared a USOC medical staff. So each team had kind of their each sport had their own floor with their own medical staff, their own hospitality, like their own like lounge area, hospitality area, and like stuff like that. But there was also like a main USOC like Olympic committee like area in the bottom of the village. You could hang out with other sports, and
but it was cool though.
Yeah,
you never knew who you're gonna run into on the elevator, so it's just like you could like I got on the elevator and I was like, wait a minute, I think you're Katie Ledecky. She's like, I am. I was like, well, that sounds so weird, but you just never know. So it's cool because you're thinking like, wow, like I'm staying in the same building with like all these people who like you've watched and compete and like looked up to for like years, and you're like, oh, like this is like, you know, so cool. But like you said, like, you know, like every other sport, like every sport is different in their own ways, but like, you know, there was like a big main area where like all the sports from like the US were like welcome to like hang out. And I think I went in there like one time because I wanted to go see if I could get water polo tickets, and I couldn't get them, so I was sad. But yeah, but it was a lot of fun.
Was there anyone that you guys kind of got starstruck over? You're like, you were saying you ran into Katie Ledecky. Was there anyone that you were like, oh wow, like that's so and so?
Serena Williams.
I
ended up defending her row. Have I told you that one?
No.
So she was like sitting in the row, and I was like at the end of the row, and she was like 5 seats down, and it was like, I think it was like Robbie Andrews and I were like at the end of the row, and then there's like 5 empty seats, and then Serena and her like little posse of people, and people kept like jumping the row in front of us to like jump up next to me to like get pictures with Serena from like other countries. And Serena's like, hey, can you like scoot down one and like stop people from like jumping into the row? Like I'm tired of taking pictures. And I was like, oh yeah. And I was like moved down, and I was playing bodyguard for like Serena Williams during like, because you walk into the stadium and then they held you in like this like volleyball area next door to a giant like stadium. And so like we were in there like holding area, like, sitting in all like the stadium seats, and like she's like, can you scoot down so like people stop jumping up to take pictures of me? She's like, I'm really tired of this.
Yeah. Serena, the whole basketball team. I remember like me and Jenna were like, you go tell them you want a picture. And we were like, well, somebody go tell them we want a picture, because we want a picture with the whole basketball team. And like that was fun. And we were like walking in opening ceremonies, and I was like making a Snapchat video, and then I see like Michael Phelps behind me, and I just like stopped filming because I was like, oh my God, like Michael Phelps is like literally like 6 feet behind me. Like, what am I gonna do? Like, am I gonna say anything? Like, do I tap him on the shoulder? And so yeah, it was like, I don't know, like it was cool. Katie Ledecky really caught me off guard though. I was like, just could not stop looking at her the whole like elevator ride. I was just like, wow, I love her so much, and she's just so cool. And I think she thinks that I'm a weirdo, but whatever. So, you know, I saw the gymnastics team like going to go eat one day, and I'm like, wow, they're like 2 foot tall. So that's cool. Yeah.
Okay, so you guys mentioned kind of getting to know people and camaraderie, and I've talked to some other people about this, but what's that like wanting to get to know people, but like you said, you're also competing for the same medal. So like you're enemies, but you're friends at the same time.
Ooh, I think
I think when you
I
get to that point, you
don't.
have already developed some kind of friendship with them.
Hmm.
Like very rarely do you have somebody who like you've never met before that's like competing within the same event
Oh,
or
yeah.
like the same like I had a situation in Worlds where like I was roommates with like Bryce Hoppel, and it's like we're competing against the same medal. We're roommates, and technically I'd only met him at USA's and talked to him at USA's for the first time, and they're like we're competing for the same thing, like the top 3 spots to make the world team. But like we developed a good friendship even though we were like competing for the same thing and um like competing in the same event, competing for the same medals. But like in that situation, like we roomed together, we made a friendship, we developed a friendship, and like but like same thing if I had a room with Donovan, who like is my teammate, was a teammate, and like yeah, like teammate at home training and teammate on the US team, and we're competing for the same medals and competing to like win USA's against each other. Like we're very competitive against each other. We still have a really good friendship, and we always want like as long as the other person like has the same opportunity as you have, and it's straight up like man versus man, and you get beat. Like there's nothing really that you can like.
Yeah.
I'm never gonna hold it against the other person or the other teammate that like beats me on the
Yeah,
day.
for sure.
So
Same. And I think when you get to that level, like if being friends with someone like is going to prohibit you from achieving like what your goal is there, like, like this is not the sport for you because we're such a small community. Like 95% of the time you're friends with everyone in your event group because I'm like, I see you guys everywhere. You know what I mean? Like when we're in Rio's, like you hang out with all the college kids and it's like, I'm not like I'm not gonna be mad because I literally see you guys like every other weekend. Like, this is like the norm for us. Like me and Deja, I'm like, I literally have seen you every single day for the last 2 years. So like, yeah, we're sitting here and being roommates, running the same event, but like who cares? Like if you can't turn it on, like turn on your like whatever it's called, like your things, if you can't turn it on like when it's time to like rock and roll, like this is just not the sport for you. So I think it's like easy for everyone to kind of like just be friends and hang out. And I think, you have to like kind of support each other. And it's like, you never know when it's going to be your day and when it's going to be someone else's day. And you have to be able to like be happy for someone else so they can feel the same for you. Because if you don't have friends in the track and field world, it can get really lonely really quick. So,
And you mentioned you were roommates with Deja Stevens, who you went to college with.
mhm,
And so in the last Olympics, there was quite a few Oregon Ducks that were
there were.
there with you. Did that make you more comfortable knowing that you had so many people from back home there with you?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think having Deja there was kind of like, it it felt no different because it was just kind of like we literally practiced together every single day. Like I have seen you on your bad days, you've seen me on my bad days. Like there's no pressure. It feels kind of like you just brought like a little piece of home with you. You know what I mean? Like to see Jenna there and like Phyllis there and like Devin, it's like I see these are the same people that I've seen every single day for the last year. Like, it's a little piece of home. So I feel like it makes it a little bit better. You feel more comfortable and you don't feel as like oh like I don't like you don't feel like you are getting yourself into something that like you don't really know, like oh my god, like what am I doing here, like you don't feel so like left out. You're like I belong here, these are my people who were here with me, we've earned this. And like it makes things easier. Even at when we went to world champs next year, it was like having Deja there, it's like like I know what it took for you to get there, I know what it took for me to get there, so it makes things like a little bit more easier for sure.
Now, after the Olympics, you still had another year of eligibility and you competed at Oregon. And then you kind of stepped away from competing in track and field for a while, Ari. What led to that decision to kind of step to the side?
um my last year of college was a bit of like a rough year. I think physically and emotionally, it just really took a toll on me. Um, and for a while, I would say up until like the end of like the year, like December or so, like I had every intention to kind of like go out there and like still run and do whatever. Then I just kind of got to the point where I'm like, I'm so tired that like I haven't even gotten a chance to like recover and regroup and kind of like see where my head's at. And I was like, well, I'm not in a good space to do this. Like, my heart's not in it. I don't really want to do it. I don't care. And then I kind of like was like, oh, maybe I'll take like a year break. And, if I miss it, I'll come back. And if I don't, then I won't. And I think it's kind of like where I'm at. Like, I don't miss it enough to want to put myself back through all of that, like to go through and like train so hard and get myself back in like that mental space to be ready to like compete for a spot on the Olympic team. Like, I just don't think I'm there yet. So I don't know, like I just don't miss it enough to come back. Like the little piece of track that I do miss that like it's fulfilled, going to meets with him and being like a coach some meets and being a spectator, like I'm totally good with that. And it took me a while to come to like that realization because I didn't want people to feel that like I'm throwing away something or like I'm just giving up because I don't think it's just so much deeper than that for me. But at the end of the day, like I have no regrets about my decisions. Like I'm good where I'm at. I teach kids and I love kids to death. It's something I've always wanted to do. So I'm happy. Like I've never been happier, and I think for me, that's all that matters. And I've come to understand that like those who really truly like love you and support you will understand that, and there should be no other questions. So, yeah.
So, which is more nerve-wracking, or well, I guess was more nerve-wracking for you? You competing or you watching Clayton compete?
Watching Clayton compete, and I say that all the time. I literally always say, I'm like, I can count on one hand how many times I've been nervous in the last 10 years of like running track and field. And I can say that every time Clayton gets on the line, I'm about to throw up. Like at Melrose last year, I was throwing up in the trash can and someone was like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm just really, really nervous." And I don't know, watching you compete and being there is worse than like seeing him like at home. Like if I'm at home watching it and he's at the meet, I'm like, okay. But if I'm at the meet, I'm like, oh my God, like I'm about to pass out. I'm gonna throw up. I need a trash can. I need a cold towel. Like I'm a bit of high maintenance when I go to track meets. But I don't know. Like I feel like a lot of people feel that way. A lot of people, I'm like, I'm never nervous for me. Like when I get on the line, I'm like, oh, I either got it or I don't. Like it is what it is. So, but I don't know. To like watch him compete, like it's hard because like I have no control, and I think that's what it comes down to. I'm like, I have no control about how this race is gonna go and like what he's gonna do, and I don't know. But it's definitely harder watching you than it is competing for myself. So
Yeah, I mean, lacking control definitely would make something more nerve-wracking. Clayton, would you say that's similar to you as when you were watching Ari compete, or when you're watching anyone compete? Is that similar to that lack of control make you more nervous, or do you still get pretty nervous when you run?
I mean, I get a little nervous when I run, but I think for sure like that lack of control thing affected me watching Ari. There was a lot of like my thing is like I never really got sick or passed out, but I just sit in silence and just like sit with like my hands like this. Like I remember multiple times like sitting at Hayward like this with my head in like my arms, like just like watching the race. Like there's a lot of times where like people try to have a conversation with me and they'd be like, okay, there's no way like I'm having a conversation with you, but I don't know, like to me, like maybe it's coming from like the distance thing, like and knowing where Ari was and trusting Ari, it's like it's kind of like the same thing what she just said, like either she has it or she don't. And I know like I knew she was putting in the work and I knew she was either gonna have it or not on that day. So like there was like super nervousness, but it was like once the gun went off, it was kind of like all the nervousness was gone. It was just like an excitement, but I still didn't say anything while she raced. I just like sat there and like watched what was going on and very like intently wanted to know like how she was doing, how she looked. And like I could tell like getting into the blocks, like what kind of mindset, like you could just start to like pick up on these little things. But like where she's got to last like 2 minutes or 4 minutes of like making it through a whole race. And like, there's a lot more going on in a distance race and a lot more that could happen. Whereas like, I kind of knew when she got in the blocks of 100 meters or 200, it's like, okay, like 10 seconds and like 20 seconds, like I just got to make it through. And like, it's once she gets out of the blocks, like, all she's got to do is finish her. Like it's a little bit different for me coming from like the longer thing. And I think it's like different for her because she's like in that mindset of like, I'm either have it or I don't. Whereas like when you show up to a distance race, it's like, there's so much thing to go on in a minute 45. It's like, she knows that like there's a lot going through my mind and a lot going on in the race that could easily change in a heartbeat. Yeah.
So Ari, you had mentioned when we were talking about you stepping away from track that you're teaching now. So is that the only thing you're doing, or what kind of things are you doing now to
Oh,
outside of track to fill your time?
I teach, I coach. I'm starting to collect Disney pins, and I think that's like our big hobby right now is collecting Disney pins, and I'm gonna start trading and selling and doing that. My dogs take up way more time than any dog should ever. So I think those are like my main things. I think, I for a while I thought I would be bored and feel like I have nothing to do, but I really like I'm just finding myself struggling to find the time to do other things. Like I think they have so much going on. And every day is like, from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. I'm like busy and I have practices to go to and I have, games to go to and it's a lot. And still trying to find the time to get on a plane and be wherever he needs me to be. But I don't know. Like I like it. I like the I don't know. I'm having fun. I'm having a lot of fun. Every day for me is like a different day. Like I think I really enjoy children. I enjoy anyone under the age of 17. So I deal with a lot of like, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. And then in the afternoons I deal with a lot of, 14, 15, and 16-year-olds. So I get both sides of the spectrum. And then I come home and I deal with a 24-year-old. So I really, I get it all. So
You're just dealing with people all day,
I'm
basically.
dealing with people all day, and it's a lot. I'm not gonna lie, it can be a lot, but it's worth it though. You know.
What exactly are you teaching
So
and
I
coaching?
teach. I am coaching cheer, and going to start coaching track here in the spring, and then I teach creative movement. So I teach gymnastics and dance and yoga to preschoolers. So
Wow.
yeah, I hit all this. I hit it all there, and I people are like taken back by that, but people don't know that like I danced for like 11 years of my life. So like really and truly, I danced longer than I ran track. So dance is really like more of like all that I know. I know more about the dance world than I do about track. So and I also cheered for 6 years. So I'm hitting all of my what I used to be, I guess. So all my
So
hats,
you might be an Olympian, but you're really the dance and cheer extraordinaire, is what I'm hearing.
basically so.
And Clayton, so you're from Ohio originally, and then you came out to the Pacific Northwest. What kind of interest do you have outside of track? Do you have interest from back in Ohio that you still try to do?
I mean, I think like
Coins.
yeah, like I collected like rare coins. Like that's kind of like a hobby and investment opportunities I do. I grew up doing that. Kind of really gotten into like wine and like learning about wine and studying wine and like potentially looking at that for like a future thing beyond running. Play golf in the free time. That's like the physical thing that I do outside of running, even though I rarely want to go because I'm just like physically just running's where I put everything, but golf's kind of the thing. And then like but the same kind of thing with like running being the full-time thing and it really being a full-time thing to me. And like I kind of said before, maximizing that and putting as many hours as I do into it. Like I really do just come home and like relax and really want to unwind and do nothing and hang out with the dogs and hang out with Ari and watch Netflix you really aren't left with a whole lot of time for a whole lot of hobbies in this sport. So the usual like video games on the side and like but like really for me like my current kind of fab thing is like really picked up on the wine thing and really kind of gotten into that. So
Now, I also saw recently that growing up you were a hog showman. Did I get that correct?
yeah, pig showman. Yeah. So I grew up in 4-H and FFA and grew up on a farm and showed pigs at the county and state fairs and national shows growing up until I was like really a junior in high school. And so yeah, so it's like my family all grew up like through like the agricultural industry in different aspects. And my dad was large in like the swine and pig industry, traveling like the U.S. As like a salesman, fieldman for them for the association, and kind of that's how he grew up and was raised and did for his life, and kind of brought us into like the 4-H and FFA kind of life, I guess. Yeah.
And I saw that you at one point there was an article and you kind of attributed that work ethic that you learned through that to kind of the same work ethic you use in track. How did that affect your work ethic growing up?
I think like the easy translation is like, so like when you have a pig and you're getting ready for the fair, you purchase the pig in April or March, and then you show it in August. And so you have, again, like kind of a 4 or 5 month span where you really kind of like, you have this project that you're in charge of, and you need to take it from like a 50-pound pig up to a 150-pound pig, and grow it and raise it and make it into this like show animal. And it's kind of how track and field, with like, you really have like a 4 or 5 month stretch where you're starting with your basic fitness, and you're trying to fine tune your body into this like machine at the end of the 4 or 5 months. And especially in the professional track and field world, there's a lot of days where there's nobody watching. Like today I worked out and I was completely alone, and did the workout completely alone with no coach, no teammate, no nothing to work out with. And there's a lot of days where you go out to do your chores in the barn and to get this like livestock ready for the fair, that you have no one watching. And you could easily get away with not doing anything. I could easily went and not did the workout, or easily could have, as a kid, went to the barn and not done nothing. But when you get to the end of like the 4 or 5 months, all those days where you didn't do anything start to add up, and you can kind of tell on show day like who really did their work prior to it and who didn't. And it's kind of the same thing if you show up to your race after 4 or 5 months of training, you can tell who kind of put in the work and who didn't put in the work and do all the little things.
Okay. Is there any potential hog showmanship in the future for you? Because I saw you almost won a championship at one point, correct?
Yeah, I did win a championship or two. As like so there's different styles. Is like you judge off of your like showmanship qualities, which is just how you show the pig and like your etiquette and how you show it and like your maneuvers and everything like this. Like more on like how you do comparative to like how good your pig is. And then I was like top 3 a couple times in like the entire like county and state with the actual. So I like had some success in it, but kind of leaving the agricultural side to like my brother. He's kind of like well into the livestock side now, and really growing his like career in the livestock thing. We've kind of taken different directions, and I for sure will probably like take my kids to the county fair and the state fair and really like show them like, hey, like I used to do this, and let them laugh away at it. And Ari's already done that. We went to like the county fair in Eugene or whatever,
Yeah.
and she laughed at me there when I was like, oh, this is what you have to do. And like I'll probably have to explain more to her now that like I'm not gonna scare her away and actually have her married. I don't have to scare her away. But I don't see anything where like I grow up or live like we raise our kids or anything on a farm. I'll let my brother take care of that and have his agricultural family.
So besides that aspect from Ohio, what are some of the biggest differences in your lifestyle now than it was when you were back in Ohio where you grew up?
I mean, I think like growing up, I grew up in a very rural area. So like we were like 20, 30 minutes from like the shopping centers and the fast food places and restaurants and stuff like that. So I think like moving into the big city in college and moving into like the bigger city now in Portland, it's like a big change just there in lifestyle of just like being able to like kind of hop out the door and you're at the grocery store. Whereas before it was like an entire effort to get to the store and stuff like that. And I think that's maybe like was the biggest change, like especially going to college was like that. I do like just being farther away from home, being on the West Coast was like a transition of like the 3-hour time change was like a transition of like your family's up earlier, your friends are up earlier, but then like at night, like I'm texting my dad and it's like 9, 10 o'clock and I'm like, okay, why is he not replying? Then I realize he's in bed because 1 a.m. But like just little things like that. But I've kind of always been good, and my parents did a really good job of like kind of like grooming me into like being self-sufficient and really doing a lot on my own. So like moving away was like to college and to here now has been a really easy transition for me. And outside of the normal stressors of like just moving, it really has been a pretty smooth transition.
So heading into this season, going back to track real quick. So the kind of the main season for track and field is the Diamond League. But when you head into a Diamond League season with the Olympics at the end, as opposed to either nothing or potentially world championships at the end. How do you kind of approach that differently, knowing there's a bigger goal at hand at the end there?
I think when it's an Olympic year like this, you put the Olympic trials as number one. You put the Olympics as 1A, because obviously without the trials, the Olympics doesn't happen in our sport. And especially in the U.S., you have to be on top of your game at the Olympic trials. So I think how I kind of look at it with my kind of like team or whatever, and my agent and my coach and Ari and everybody who kind of like is surrounding me this year is like, we put the Olympics as one, and what do I need to do to succeed at the Olympics and the Olympic trials? And if I can go compete and travel Europe and compete in meets and compete for prize money, compete to run fast times and do all these things and run indoor worlds like I'm planning to try to run and run USAs and all these indoor meets I want to do, how does that affect the Olympic trials in June and my ability to be the best I can be in the Olympic trials in June? And if it's a positive for that number one race, then I can add it to the list and compete in it. But I think I went through a season and we went through a season in 2018 where there was no Olympics or Olympic trials or worlds or really a competitive USAs. We had a lot of fun, and I was able to travel all over the world and compete in all these kinds of meets and do all these meets and do a lot of like back-to-back weekends and run the 1500 when I wanted to and run the 800 when I wanted to and have kind of more of a fun with the season. But I do enjoy, like, you kind of put the Olympics at the top and really just whatever builds around that and can build you up to make you the best you could possibly be at the Olympic trials and the Olympics, then like that's kind of where the season builds.
You mentioned running the 15 and the 8. You've talked in the past about doubling before. Do you still have thoughts of doubling potentially at the Olympics for this upcoming Olympics?
I think right now, like, the focus is the 800, and I really want to be successful in the 800 and really put all my eggs in one basket. At the Olympic trials, with it being a split session, there is a sense that there is an opportunity that you can double a little bit easier than a world championship or regular USA championships. With it being the 2 sessions in the longer trials, it is technically possible to double, and the 800 is first. So I wouldn't say that I'm not going to rule out the fact that I could run both the USAs, but training wise, racing wise, my focus for outdoor for trials is going to be like on the 800 and really being successful in that. But indoor season, I'm going to focus on the 1500 and kind of run that at USAs and hopefully qualify for what indoors with the 1500, and really gain some experience in that for the future. And for sure, not ruling out 24 or even trying in 23 Torque World Championships, trying to double and maybe even like try to make both teams and run both at the Worlds or Olympics. I don't want to ever rule it out because it's something that I kind of dreamed of in college and tried at once and had some unsuccess, but I don't think that that's ever completely gone away. But I think for sure, just focusing on one event for right now and focusing on the 800 and really trying to like put all my eggs in that one basket has worked in the past, and I think it's something that I can work with well.
And you have a bronze medal. You earlier in early 2019, you set a indoor world record on the flat track. So you've accomplished a lot of different things. What kind of goals do you still keep setting for yourself down the line?
I think I said it in an interview after Rio, and I kind of said it jokingly, but I've kind of like taken it to heart as like it was bronze. It wasn't like a silver or gold, and it wasn't and it was close to an American record and under 143, but it wasn't an American record. So I think I still gonna have that chip on my shoulder walking away from Rio of like, okay, I have like more I can accomplish. Especially this year, seeing the success Donovan had in breaking the American record and winning the first world outdoor title that from the U.S. and forever in the 800, and seeing that and kind of knowing that like if he can accomplish that, then like I think that like I can accomplish those kind of things, and I think it kind of just reignited those goals. And so yeah, I think that it's pretty easy for myself, even having a bronze medal, to still set new goals, because I think every race and every year is a new set of goals and a new things to do, new heights to reach. And I don't try to relish on the bronze at all. Like I don't think since I've moved to Portland, I haven't got out my bronze medal once out of like where I keep it. I just don't really relish on it. I don't talk about it a lot. I mean, I don't know. Like I don't ever talk about that rate. Like I've tried to like just really focus on the future and really trying to get to the next stage.
Okay. And last thing, I've been asking this same question. This is for both of you. Asking the same question to everyone who ran at the old Hayward Field, I guess it would be called now. With the trials coming up at the new Hayward Field, what do you think the biggest difference will be competing at an exact same spot, exact same town, exact same place, but it's an entirely new stadium?
You want me to go first?
I mean, I have less experiences than she does. I mean, she's on the track every day for 4 years, whereas I was on it just a couple times for the big Prefontaine, for NCAAs, for trials in 2016. So I've had some like pretty big meet experiences on it. I think and I also hope, but I also probably know that like the same Hayward crowd's going to be there. And as much as it's not the same exact 400 meters, I think the magic's still going to be there. And I think the stadium itself looks absolutely stunning, and it's going to be an amazing place to compete and spectate and watch track and field. But I think the athletes will still come, and the fans will still be there, and the knowledge of the sport and the excitement of the sport is still in Eugene. I don't think that's going anywhere, as much as people are going to try to or we're trying to boycott the thing, or said they weren't going to come to the new stadium or whatever, or run out in the field and shriek at NCAAs, whatever people were doing to try to boycott the thing. I think those people will still realize that the athletes are still going to be there. There's still going to be amazing performances, and it is what you make it. And I think Eugene and the athletes are still going to make it a special place. I hope.
Yeah, I feel the same. A small part of me is a little sad, and I think that everyone who spent a significant amount of time at Hayward's a little sad, because it's kind of, you feel like, oh, this little small kind of place that I've called home for the last however many years, is no longer there. But I'm a big believer that change is always good and evolution is always good, and I think that there's no place better for a facility like this to be at than Eugene. Where else are you going to get, the best track and field facility in the United States, along with the best fans in the United States? And, this is where the best of the best come to compete every single year. This is the best place for it to be, regardless of what other people think. And I will literally debate with people all day long on Twitter. I don't care. But there's literally you couldn't put this place somewhere else in the US and think that the same amount of people and the same fans are going to show up, because no one understands track and field like the people in Eugene do. So I think that the magic will still be there. I think that it's going to be amazing. I believe that a lot of people are going to be speechless when they see it and it's done and it's complete. And, the first meet there is going to be so special. And I am going to do everything in my power to be at Pac-12s. I'm going to do everything in my power to be at Twilight. I want to be able to see it. And I think that even the kids who go to Oregon and practice there, they're going to still feel the same magic that they feel when they practice at the old Hayward. I think it's something that's really, really good for our sport. And I think that it's something that's really going to help Eugene's case of people always argue why they always have the big meets there. And I think it's, well, duh, look at this place, look where you run. And I think more so for the kids who practice there every single day than the people who just come to compete every once in a while. It's just going to be so good to have, somewhere indoors where you can have somewhere to practice and have a locker room, which we've never really had a locker room before. So I'm really excited for all those who get to experience it after me. I'm sad that I wasn't there for it, even though we were supposed to be there for it, but it's totally fine. And I think that everyone's going to enjoy it. And I think that it's only just going to help our sport grow, hopefully.
You don't sound upset at all that you missed it by just a couple of years.
I am a little sad. I actually told Coach Johnson when they were supposed to first have it done, it was supposed to be done 2018. I was like, oh, I always said I was going to stay for my redshirt year. Well, since it's going to be done, I'll stay. And then they were like, oh, well, it's going to be postponed. I was like, well, there goes my redshirt year. I'm not staying. So, so sorry about that. But no, I think it'll be an amazing addition to our sport. I think that it's something that the U.S. really, really needed. And I think that, along with having the world champs there, next summer will really just I think it'll bring a lot of like new knowledge to our sport and bring a lot of new fans to our sport who don't really know what our sport's about. So
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for being my guest and the first duo guests on Beyond the Uniform. I really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for listening and watching. And I'll see you next week for the next episode of Beyond the Uniform.
yay, thanks, Teach.
This was Beyond the Uniform with TJ Brassil. Join us again next week when Australian Olympian Morgan Mitchell joins the show.